The wind rolled across the plains like a sigh from an old god, whispering through broken mesquite and low desert scrub. Dust rode the air in long amber sheets, brushing over the bones of fences and forgotten cattle trails near Deadwater Gulch, a town too tired to bury its own name. Coyotes howled from the edge of Red Hollow Canyon, their voices stretched thin, like the hopes of the people who still called this place home. The sun, swollen and scorched, dropped heavy over the horizon like a dying ember. The land was parched and stubborn, and so was Bo Rourke. He rode with a limp and a silence so heavy it settled around him like dust. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, his hat wide-brimmed and beaten soft with time. The mare under him, a dark-eyed sorrel named Whiskey, knew the way without command. She moved as if reading her rider's breath. Bo hadn't been in town for near 3 months, and even then, he spoke only when necessary and stayed just long enough to get what he needed. His cabin, a clapboard ghost set against the canyon's edge, stood alone like a monument to a man who'd made peace with being forgotten. Today he needed salt, nails, and coffee, nothing more. But as he guided Whiskey down Main Street, toward the general store, a commotion stirred outside the saloon. Voices rose, slurred and ugly, and the crowd didn't gather, they scattered. Bo saw him then, Jed Cawley, red-faced, teeth yellow as broken corn, stumbling on Whiskey legs and dragging a child by the wrist. "She don't listen worth a damn anyway," Jed bellowed, holding the girl out like a broken tool. "She's mute or deaf or cursed, I don't care. $5 and I'll throw in my flask." The girl didn't flinch. She was maybe 10, bone-thin, her feet bare on the splintered wood, dress torn, eyes flat and distant, like a rabbit trapped too long. She looked at no one, and no one looked back. Bo halted. The sun caught the metal of his belt buckle. His hand dropped to his side, but not to his gun. His boots creaked as he stepped down. "Don't," someone murmured from the store porch. "Ain't your fight, Bo." He ignored them. Jed turned, wobbling. "Well, looky here. The silent lawman rides again." He chuckled. "You want her. She's yours. $5 and tobacco. Ain't no refunds." Bo reached into his coat. He laid down 5 crumpled bills and a leather pouch with a faded sheriff's star stamped into the flap. Jed took them with glee, spat in the dirt, and stumbled back into the saloon, already forgetting her. The girl didn't run, didn't cry, didn't move. Bo crouched slowly, his old knees aching. He offered a hand. She didn't take it, but after a moment, she followed as he turned, walking 3 paces behind him like a shadow. They rode in silence back to the canyon, her clinging to the saddle horn, hair tangled in the wind. She didn't look at him once. She didn't seem to hear the coyotes or the rustle of the hawk wings above them. Somewhere near the ridge, he spoke softly. "Can you hear me?" No answer. Back at the cabin, she stood at the threshold as if afraid the house might bite. He fetched her a blanket, a tin cup of water, and bread warmed over the fire. She sat, hands folded, staring at the flames. She didn't eat until he left the room. Over the days that followed, she became part of the cabin like the creak in the floorboards or the whisper of wind through the chimney. She moved like a ghost, quiet and quick. He watched her more than she knew. When she didn't respond to thunder or the crack of wood, he understood. Deaf, not dumb. One evening, as the sun painted the canyon walls blood red, he handed her a stick and scratched in the dirt. A circle, a line, a hand to chest, then out. "Me. Bo." She tilted her head, then slowly, uncertainly, mimicked him. He pointed to the small twisted tree near the edge of the bluff. "Juniper," he said aloud. He pointed at her. The name stuck. She began to help him in small ways. Feeding the hens, carrying firewood. She learned his gestures, and he adapted his to hers. They weren't real signs, not at first, but they understood enough to work. When he coughed, she brought water. When he frowned at the door, she closed it. The silence became less of a wall and more of a bridge. He found her one morning with his old slingshot. She had pegged 3 crows in the garden without breaking a sweat. He whistled low, forgot she couldn't hear it. But she grinned when he clapped once, soft and proud. In the quiet hours, when he thought she was asleep, he would open the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside lay a photograph, a woman with sharp eyes and a child with ribbons in her hair. Juniper saw it once, but didn't ask. She only touched the corner gently, then left the room. One afternoon, he returned from hauling feed to find her tracing the canyon wall with her fingers, eyes closed. She was feeling the earth's breath, the texture of stone, the story beneath it all. She was listening, just differently. But peace never holds long in the frontier. It was in Deadwater Gulch that he heard the name again. Red Knuckle Gang. 5 riders. Killers. Cass Mercer at the lead, cruel, cunning, and rumored to have put a preacher's eyes out with a branding iron. "They're cutting through from the east," the storekeeper whispered. "Already hit Sandrock. Took a girl from there. Didn't leave anyone else standing." Bo said nothing, just nodded once. On the ride back, the dust felt heavier, the sun more distant. When he crested the hill and saw Juniper feeding the goats, a strange tightness gripped his chest. That night, he pulled down the old crate from above the rafters. Inside was a rifle wrapped in oilcloth. He cleaned it slowly, hand steady. He wet his knife till it sang. Juniper watched from the doorway. She didn't ask why. She just understood. In the silence between them, something stirred, something fierce and sacred. Bo wasn't just preparing for trouble. He was preparing to become who he used to be. Juniper knelt at the edge of a dry wash, one hand pressed to the earth. Her eyes narrowed on the faint imprints left in the dust. Bo stood a few paces behind, rifle slung across a shoulder, watching the way her fingers traced the boot marks with eerie precision. 5 sets. Deep. Rushed. He could read them well enough. But she saw more than he did, felt more. She stood slowly, looked back at him, and gave the slightest nod. "They're close," he muttered, more to himself than her. The morning wind carried a bitter scent, sweat, leather, and something acrid beneath. Trouble. By midday, the news had caught up. A rancher named Emery Teller, who lived just a mile south, was found gutted near his own corral. The cows hadn't been touched. Just Emery, stripped of boots and dignity, his eyes still wide open. The Red Knuckle Gang had come to the canyon. That evening, the fire crackled low in Bo's hearth. Shadows danced across the log walls as Juniper sat cross-legged, carving little shapes into soft wood with a pocket knife. Bo sipped black coffee, boots off, cleaning a revolver slowly, though he hadn't touched it in years. The quiet was broken not by sound, but by a ripple. His mare, Whiskey, tensed outside and let out a soft, warning snort. Bo was on his feet before the echo faded. 5 riders approached from the trees, silhouettes backlit by the last orange light of day. Their gait was slow and confident, like snakes warmed by fire. Cass Mercer rode at the front, long coat brushing the stirrups, rifle cradled in one hand like it was part of his spine. His face was lean, scarred, and arrogant. Bo turned to Juniper and pointed to the trapdoor beneath the kitchen rug. Her eyes widened only slightly. No protest. She disappeared down into the cellar, closing it silently behind her. The riders halted just beyond the fence. One of them chuckled. Bo stepped onto the porch, hand raised in feigned greeting. His gait was heavy, exaggerated, the limp more dramatic than real. "Well, what do we have here?" Cass said, dismounting. His voice was molasses laced with venom. "Evening." Bo slurred, eyes half-lidded. "Just an old man. No trouble here." "Thought we might stay the night," Cass said, walking forward. "Need a place to lay our heads. And we heard there might be a girl here. You seen one?" Bo blinked dumbly, then turned, hollered over his shoulder. "Wife's been dead 10 years. Ain't no girls here 'cept hens." They laughed. Not kindly. One of the younger outlaws spit on the porch and pushed past him into the cabin. Bo didn't move. Inside, they tore through shelves, cabinets, stomped across rugs. One kicked the cellar door, but didn't notice the iron latch Bo had rigged beneath. "I got some shine," Bo offered, voice trembling just enough. Cass smiled like a wolf. "That'll do." They drank and jeered until the moon rose high. Then they set camp a few hundred yards out, swearing and singing into the night. Cass lingered longer than the others, staring at Bo with narrowed eyes, as if reading the truth behind his shuffle and slurred speech. But finally, he turned and walked into the dark. Bo stood motionless, then closed the door with a quiet click. He waited until the wind picked up, carrying their voices away. Then he lifted the rug again, Help Juniper out. She emerged silent, alert, her eyes scanning the corners like a fox. He handed her a lantern and nodded once. She followed as he led her to the barn. There, behind a pile of feed sacks, he unearthed a buried iron box. The lock creaked. Inside, the ghost stirred. Twin Colt revolvers, pearl-handled. A long-barreled rifle with silver etching along the stock. To Papa, from Rose. A marshal's badge, dulled but intact. A photograph of a woman smiling, her arm around a dark-haired girl. He stared at it a long time. Juniper touched his arm. He looked down. She signed one word, "Why?" He didn't answer, not in words. He strapped a belt across his hips, slid the knife into his boot, and loaded each gun with mechanical care. The tremble in his hands faded. Muscle memory returned. So did the fire in his chest. They moved through the canyon like ghosts. Tripwires were stretched low between boulders. Juniper set them quick and silent, crouched like a desert cat. Bo climbed the ridge, burying small kegs of black powder in dry rock hollows, packed just tight enough to scatter noise and shrapnel when tripped. By the time the moon dipped behind the hills, the canyon had teeth. Bo waited until the campfire burned low. Then he moved. The first to die never made a sound. A slit throat, quick and clean. Bo dragged the body behind a fallen tree, eyes scanning for movement. But the others were drunk, careless, deep in their own stink. Then came the mistake, a dry twig underfoot. A second outlaw snapped awake, rising, pistol drawn. But before he could shout, a boot hit his chest and Bo fired once through his eye. The shot broke the night wide open. Asterisk, we're under attack. Asterisk, someone screamed. The traps sang their deadly song. One man tripped a wire and vanished in a cloud of rocks and dust. Another turned to run and took a slug in the leg, then the gut. He screamed until silence took him. Cass was already ducked behind a rock, rifle drawn, eyes scanning. Asterisk, it's him. Asterisk, he roared. It's the old bastard. He wasn't wrong. Bo moved like the shadows were his blood, but he wasn't fast enough to avoid the bullet that caught him in the shoulder. He staggered, fell to one knee, blood pouring between his fingers. The pain roared through him, but he gritted his teeth and stayed upright. Juniper had followed. She shouldn't have, but she did. Bo saw her out of the corner of his eye, small frame darting between rocks, slingshot in hand. She ducked behind an overturned crate as one of the outlaws bore down on Bo's flank. She popped up and fired. A rock cracked against the man's temple, staggering him just long enough. Bo turned and fired. The outlaw dropped. Bo turned to Juniper, furious, gesturing frantically. Hide. She shook her head. The last man stood now, Cass Mercer. Rifle in hand, ice cold. You're a legend, Cass said, stepping into the open. Beauregard Rourke. I grew up on stories about you. Bo said nothing. Blood soaked his sleeve. You were faster once, Cass sneered. But now you take in freaks and hide in canyons. Bo stared, his eyes flat and steady. Cass drew. So did Bo. One shot echoed through the canyon, louder than any thunder. Dust lifted in a low cloud, then fell. Cass stumbled. Looked down. Blood bloomed from his chest. He dropped to his knees, then into the dust, mouth open in disbelief. Bo stood still, smoke curling from his revolver. The wind picked up again, whispering through the rocks. Juniper ran to him. Her small hands reached up, brushed his cheek. She saw the blood, but her hands trembled more from fear than horror. She signed, safe. He nodded, and though his vision swam, he managed a tired smile. Together, they stood in the stillness of the aftermath. The girl he saved had saved him too. The morning after the bloodshed, the canyon was eerily quiet. Not even the wind dared disturb the silence. Bo moved through the wreckage slowly, favoring his wounded shoulder, every movement stiff with age and pain. He dug 5 shallow graves just beyond the ridge, beneath a knotted juniper tree where the soil turned to clay. He didn't mark them, didn't speak over them, just filled them, one by one, with rocks and dust and whatever sins they carried. Their horses, wild-eyed and restless, pawed at the ground as if sensing the judgment overhead. He took a hot brand from the forge and burned away the sigils on their flanks, leaving them nameless. Then he set them loose into the wild, where no man could claim them again. Back at the cabin, he laid his guns out on the table, cleaned them slow. oiled the metal, wiped the barrels, checked every mechanism with the reverence of a priest handling relics. Then he wrapped them in oilcloth and placed them back in the iron chest, locking it tight. The badge he didn't bury, but it didn't go back on his chest either. It sat on the mantel, beside a photograph that had once belonged to a life lost in another time. Word traveled faster than wagons. Within days, whispers reached Deadwater Gulch and beyond. They say Rourke took out the red knuckles by himself. Beauregard Rourke? I thought he was long dead. No, sir. He's still out there. And he don't miss. But Beau gave no statements. He didn't return to town. He didn't boast or explain. The canyon was his courtroom, the verdict written in blood. That was enough. The weeks passed slowly, like melting snow. His wound scabbed, then scarred. The stiffness in his arm never fully left, but he learned to favor it without complaint. Juniper became his shadow, his healer, his wordless reminder that life still pressed on. She cooked what she could, watered the sprouts in his broken garden, and fed the animals with a diligence that was almost ritual. Each evening, they sat together by the fire. Sometimes she carved small wooden animals, gifting him a bear, a fox, once even a crooked horse that resembled whiskey. Other times, she drew with charcoal on rough scraps of paper, scenes of the cabin, the canyon, a man with a wide hat beside a little girl holding flowers. He kept that one pin beside the window. She never asked about the fight, never needed to. She had seen it, felt it, lived through it beside him. The horror didn't haunt her eyes, not anymore. What lived there now was stillness, a kind of peace. She hadn't spoken since she arrived, but Beau learned that silence didn't mean emptiness. One night he sat on the porch, a harmonica to his lips. The melody floated low and rough across the dirt yard, bending around the sagebrush and into the canyon beyond. Juniper watched him not with her ears, but her eyes. She studied the way his fingers moved, the way his chest swelled with each breath. After a while, she stood, walked to him, and gently placed her small hand on his chest. She stayed there, eyes closed, feeling the hum of the notes through his ribs. When he stopped, she smiled, a quiet, secret smile that needed no words. That night, as the fire burned low and coyotes called in the distance, she curled beside him on the rug, head on his side, blanket tucked tight, the way children sleep when they know they're finally safe. The first snow dusted the canyon weeks later, light and soft as ash. Beau packed his saddle one morning under a silver fog. Supplies were running low, and the hens had stopped laying. He slipped a canvas roll into the bags, tied them down with a grunt, and cinched Whiskey's reins as steam curled from her breath. Just as he was about to mount, a tug at his coat stopped him. He turned. Juniper stood there, eyes big beneath her knit scarf, fingers twitching nervously at her sides. He crouched slowly, knees aching. She reached out, cupped his face, and leaned close. Her lips trembled. Then, barely a breath, so soft it might have been a breeze, she whispered, "Beau." It struck him like thunder. His heart paused, then surged, filling every corner of his chest. He stared at her, jaw tight, eyes wet with something he couldn't name. She blinked, afraid maybe she'd broken something sacred. But then he smiled, not the weary half-smile he wore like armor, but something real, old, and reborn. He placed his hand gently on the back of her head, pulled her into a one-armed embrace, and held her there until the cold wind turned. When he lifted her onto the saddle in front of him, she nestled in close. No words needed. As they rode toward the horizon, the fog parted, and the sky blushed gold. And somewhere, deep in the canyon shadows, the wind carried a story. They still tell it in hushed tones at night, when the fire's low and the stars press close. Of a girl who had no voice until the day she whispered a name, and of a man who thought himself too broken to save anyone, until he did.